Thank you very much. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm Jan Doerrich. I'm a CSR manager at REWE International, and we have been partner with the work packaging behavior change in the case studies phase. We worked on especially on the 3 dimensions, as mentioned before: choice editing, choice expansion, and change in choice environment. And I would try to bring in now with my presentation maybe some practical experience, and especially what our learnings have been for us as a company within the VALUMICS study, and what our findings were when it came to those 3 dimensions. And we connected it up front, of course, with certain topics. For choice editing, it was the social standards in the value chain regarding fruits and vegetables. For choice expansion, it was a project we did 2 years ago, a reusable milk bottle in the value chain. And for the change in choice environment, it was the greening of our supermarket stores, which we started just 1.5 years ago with a pilot phase. So I think there should be enough time. Maybe the time is a little short, so I will try to touch the other points briefly, but the social standard, of course, will be in focus in my presentation, and I hope I have time enough to touch the other ones as well. Maybe just general, besides what was our approach within this working package, besides the scientific approach from CSCP and the players which have been here, our partners, we focused as REWE on expert interviews, more or less, with a lot of stakeholders, many different stakeholders, suppliers mainly, producers, but also consumer organizations. And the other very important part was the internal interview phase, to get a more in-depth, detailed overview to those kinds of editing, choice editing or behavioral change studies. And upfront, the general learning for us as a company was quite interesting, because the reason why, and especially the preconditions for starting a project, have been quite different from the company's point of view and from the VALUMICS results, actually. And this gave us a way better understanding for the correlations of different dimensions. So all these outcomes, they can be very good included now in the new decision-making processes for new choice editing activities or choice expansion activities, for examples. So this is just up front. Very briefly, who we are REWE International. The facts are not so important. More important is that we are part of the REWE group, and but nevertheless we are quite independent, and we are managing all the international markets out of a headquarter near Vienna. And for this case study, for this project, we focused on the Austrian market with our store Billa. And so this is the framework. Billa Austria is here mainly the supermarket chain we are talking about. Yeah, let's start with the choice editing issue. For us, it was, we picked the social standards for fruits and vegetables, quite long-lasting choice editing tool. We started already 7 years ago. We defined a demand for social audits within the fruits and vegetable supply chain. 1 year later, we started with defined private label, a pilot phase more or less, and 2 years later we expanded it to all our products which we are buying. We did some sampling, but one key innovation, put it this way, was actually 2017, where we found out, okay, it's nice to have audits on different standards, but you also have to talk to the supplier. And we introduced so-called performance talks twice a year with each supplier. And this helped us, this gave us a boost for improving our standards, for reducing the problems we had before in the supply chain. And as I said before, this was very interesting regarding the VALUMICS in-depth analysis. Our original approach was more the risk management approach. Okay, we had some problems within the supply chain regarding social standards, and this was the main approach. Of course, we expected the consumer also to value those activities, but that's, to be honest, was not really the case, because it was more or less a basic topic, and I will go into it in the next slide. It was not so a topic of differentiation in the consumer point of view. But when we see the learnings and the findings from the VALUMICS project level, and I divided it into 3 parts or 3 levels: the direct project level area, the extended project level area, and the general level area. Not very scientific, but for us it was a good approach to get a better understanding where are the pain points and what are the learnings in what phase. We found out choice editing can strengthen resilience. Of course, if you give your consumer additional choices, you have to know your supply chain, because you have to introduce those, you have to develop those choices somehow. And if you know your supply chain, you have more transparency, you know the problems first, you can move faster, you can act faster, and you are less susceptible to interference. So this is a very important learning for us. Another very important learning is bottom-up innovation only, or mainly, I would say mainly, probably happens in every part in the in the part of the value chain where the value chain is healthy. Put it healthy is not a very scientific approach, but where you have a good understanding with your partners, their innovation is done and can come up. On the extended project level, this was very important. This was when I talked before the performance talks, we found out this additional non-financial touch points of communications and for further understanding innovations are very important. And it's not important. Of course, it's for us as a company, it's important to talk about prices once a year or even more often when it comes to fruits and vegetables. But for me as a sustainability manager, it's very important to have these additional contact points, and there really improvement can be, or meaning improvement can take place actually, because you set besides the price topic, at least for 1 meeting or for 2 meetings, and then you can talk about sustainability, innovation and other things. So this was a very important learning. On a general level, as I just touched briefly before, social standards are more or less a basic requirement. We call it a so-called hygienic measure from the customer point of perspective. So this is very important. As I said, it's not really an issue of differentiation in that kind of case. The customer demands it, of course. They don't want to they don't want to deal with it actually, and they don't want to be concerned with those kind of issues. They think, okay, this product has to fulfill a certain standard, and that's it. And the other side, what is good for fruit and vegetables when it comes to choice editing, we found out a short value chain is very important, or helps, put it this way, it helps definitely. When it comes to fruit and vegetables, we have more or less 3 players. We have the producers, we have the supplier, and we have the retailer. Sometimes we only have the producer and the retailer. So choice editing is way easier if you have a short supply chain, a short value chain, and you can connect the customer and the product, or enable the retailer to influence the production more easily. On the other hand, what we found out, legislative support is needed. You have to have some kind of level playing field. Otherwise, you get in the case of a competitive disadvantage very easily, because it's not so much seen as a differentiation issue for the consumer. So you have to do something more than the market gives you, or the law says, put it this way. So it could be, if you do too much or invest too much and nobody sees it, it could be a competitive disadvantage. So a level playing field is very important when it comes to those sustainability issues. But during the crisis especially, we also found out, of course, and that's not a big surprise, but stable supply chains, they help during the crisis as a company. And you get stable supply chains if you talk to the supplier on a regular basis, and not only about prices and things like that, so quality. So choice editing in our point of view and a company point of view is very important or appropriate, where consumers are happy to delegate decision making, as I said before, if they don't want to really be concerned with such kind of decisions. It's also important in cases where certain activities are unacceptable for consumers, especially regarding food safety or as I talked about, the unfair working conditions. And this was a follow-up already in internal, more or less, from the VALUMICS project. We have the same issue when it comes to the pesticide use regarding fruit and vegetables. It's the same framework, LS. The consumers, of course, they don't want to get in touch with those kind of issues. They want to have pesticides on their products, but everybody knows in the background, at least for non-organic production, pesticides are being used. So this is a big issue. And in some cases where consumers desire, maybe in conflict, choice editing is also very important or appropriate. E.g., or for example, when the consumer wishes for a very low priced article, but on the other hand, he wants to have the most sustainable article. So this is it's a challenge, but then you have to think about choice editing in some kind of way. Let's go to the next area, the choice expansion. And we use the example of the reusable milk bottle, which we introduced in the Austrian market, almost 3 years ago right now. And just a brief background, of course, we have reusable bottles in Austria, but not in the milk sector. So we have been the first one in Austria which introduced those kind of bottles. And also, again, here, the 3 different levels. Of course, you have to have a strong courage and a strong commitment of the senior management. I mean, this is not surprising. This is true, of course, for every kind of project. But in this kind of project, it was very important because it could only be done of one person, actually, of the persistence of one person within our company. And this helped, of course, a lot. What also helped is a pragmatic and a very cooperative approach from NGO side. The NGOs are on the one hand driver for change, but also if you cooperate with them, in that case, they can additionally inform the consumer and the customer why this is a good product, why this is a choice expansion, and why the consumer should buy this kind of product and not the other one. So this was a very fruitful cooperation, actually. On the extended project level, we found out, and this is also not so much surprising, but it was good, again, to see it here on black and white. Premium packaging for premium products, they include or should include addressing environmental aspects. So if you do choice expansion on a sustainability level, you should start with the premium brand or with a premium label. But it can support trickle-down effects to a broader range. So if you have the pilot product and this works, of course, we saw it in the past, when it comes to organic products or things like this, it will trickle down and will make your range broader, and the choice will expand more or less. On a general level, and this was I wouldn't say a paradigm shift, but usually we do a lot of market research before we introduce something, and you know, all this basic business stuff you have to do before launching a product. When it comes to choice expansion, especially in the field of sustainability, it's more trial and error sometimes. And in this case, it had been 100% true. You just have to try it. You don't have any very good data. There is no other comparable product out there, so you have to try it, and you have to have the luck of good timing as well. And good timing has to do something with the precondition for success. You have to have a good alliance, of course, between production, a producer, supplier, retailer, and ideally with NGOs in that case. So all have to work together to make choice expansion in the field of sustainability a success. Yeah, and last but not least, I hope I have a couple more minutes. I just will skim.
Yes, you have the time, because we are with a time slot built in. So please go ahead.
Perfect. Then I just will close with the change in choice environment. In our case, it was the greening of supermarkets. Quite a new topic, I would say. We started also about 2 years ago with greening of, in a pilot phase with 20 supermarkets. We introduced so-called blooming areas in front of the supermarket. And you probably personally know in Austria, it's a big issue. Usually the supermarket or the outside of the supermarket is a lot of concrete, gray, and it doesn't show any sustainability at all, and it's also not good for biodiversity and things like this. So we started here this project, and it's really a change in choice in the environment, I would say. So that's why we picked it. And we found out also again on these 3 levels, the first thing was very important, especially for our business managers in certain areas. It's a license to operate thing. If you positive influence your community, if you have such, we call it lighthouse projects, such shining projects, it's easier in a positive way to get authorization for new stores, for example. So on the other hand, I have to admit, sometimes in some communities, it's already a must-have. So it's a vice versa thing, but it started out with a more license to operate issue. Of course, it's a motivation for employees. If you do here in that kind of change of environment, you give also the employees, not only the consumers, but also the employees, a better feeling to the company, and it demonstrates innovation from the company point of view. On the extended project level, yeah, of course, climate protection is an issue, and it should be reflected in infrastructure and product assortment, and it shows engagement. On the other hand, there were not really significant signs that this outside change of environment really influenced the buying habit. So this is probably one thing which has to be invested further. It helps. It makes the company more sympathy. You get a better sympathy. It maybe highlights the topic of climate change and biodiversity, especially when you make some comments there. You have like a stand outside or a flyer where it explains why you're doing this, and this could influence the buying habit. What would be the desire of in my case, especially to more organic products or more sustainable products, for example. But this link is not significant yet. On a general level, especially when it comes to those kinds of things, expert support and external experience is definitely needed, because you're doing something completely new, outside usually of your daily business routine. So you have to have a good expert support. And for us, especially within the greening of buildings, you have so many biological issues, starting from planting the right plants and how to harvest and maintain all these things. So this is very important to have here a good support. Yeah, overall, I would say for us as a company, the VALUMICS project makes it possible for us to include new methods of thinking upfront already in the new planning processes. So this helped a lot. And I think to have a certain methodology definitely will help us when it comes in the future to choice editing, choice expansion, or changing choice environmental issues. So thank you very much.